I got a letter from a man I'll call James. James is 43, owns a business, pays his bills, stays in shape. From the outside, he looks like the kind of man who should be doing fine in dating, but his letter reads like a man who's watching the same movie on repeat. He wrote, I've been on 11 first dates in 4 months. Everyone ended badly. Arguments, insults, women blocking me afterward. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. I show up on time. I'm respectful. I try to make a good impression, but somehow it falls apart. The last woman told me I was emotionally unavailable and stormed out. The one before said I was too intense. Before that, I was boring. I'm starting to think I'm the problem, but I genuinely don't know what to change. If you've ever felt like this, I want you to understand something immediately. Most men in James's position are not failing because they're cursed, or because dating is impossible, or because women are all the same. They're failing because they keep stepping into the same traps. Different faces, different restaurants, different conversations, same psychological mechanism. And the reason it feels confusing is because these traps don't look like traps at the beginning. They look like hope. They look like opportunity. They look like maybe this time. But after reading hundreds of letters like James's and listening to men describe the same patterns for years, I can tell you with clarity, when a man keeps losing at the same stage, it's rarely random. It's usually his selection process, his pace, and his frame. Today, I'm going to break down the three traps that sabotage more first dates and early relationships than anything else. Not to shame you, not to turn dating into war, not to teach manipulation. This is about awareness. Because awareness saves time. Awareness prevents regret. Awareness keeps you from paying tuition with your life. Here's the framework. Three traps. Trap one, the promise of happiness. This is when a man abandons his preferences, his boundaries, and his identity because he believes a certain woman will deliver the happiness he hasn't built within himself, usually triggered by beauty, status, or the idea of winning. Trap two, the reversal. This is when a man enters a relationship hoping it will solve a problem in his life: loneliness, housing, stability, money stress, social validation. And he ends up becoming the solution to her problems instead. He goes in looking for support and walks out drained. Trap three, the generous angel. This is when a woman floods a man with early affection, gifts, attention, and intimacy, creating an artificial sense of closeness that accelerates commitment before the man has earned enough information to evaluate who she really is. All three have one thing in common: they exploit something you want but haven't stabilized inside yourself. They offer a shortcut to fulfillment. And in relationships, shortcuts usually lead to dead ends. Let's start with trap one, because it's the most common and it's the one James was stepping into repeatedly without realizing it. Trap one, the promise of happiness. James's third date was with a woman I'll call Marina. Marina was stunning, the kind of woman who walks into a room and changes the temperature, the kind that makes men sit up straighter and forget how to breathe. James matched with her on an app and thought, no way. When she agreed to meet, he felt like he just won something. Now, here's the part James didn't emphasize in his letter, but it matters. James is introverted, not shy, not insecure, just built for calm. He likes quiet cafes, walks, places where you can talk without yelling, places where the conversation is the main event. Loud environments drain him, clubs make him tense, rooftop bars with DJs feel like punishment. He knows this about himself, so when James asked Marina where she wanted to go. She said, "Surprise me." And then she added casually, "I've been wanting to check out that new rooftop bar downtown. Live DJ. Everyone's going." James felt that little tightening in his stomach. The internal alarm. This isn't me. I'm going to hate this. But then he looked at her pictures again, and a different voice took over. "Don't mess this up. Don't be difficult. Don't look boring. Don't look small." So he said yes. The date starts exactly how these dates start. Marina shows up 40 minutes late. No real apology. Just a quick comment about traffic, like it's normal to treat another person's time like it's optional. James had been sitting alone at a table, trying to look relaxed, while the music pounded through his chest. He'd ordered a drink that cost more than he'd normally spend for an entire casual evening. He'd been watching couples laugh, groups take pictures, men compete for attention. James wasn't present. He was enduring. When Marina arrived, she didn't settle in. She was on her phone, taking photos, scanning the room, waving at people she knew, getting up to greet them, leaving James alone at the table again. And James sat there trying to perform cool while his nervous system kept whispering, "This is disrespect." After about an hour, Marina finally looked at him and said, half teasing, half judging, "You're really quiet. Are you always this boring?" Now listen carefully. That line alone didn't destroy the date. James's internal setup destroyed the date, because by the time she said it, he'd already stacked frustration, wrong environment, late arrival, high cost, low respect, constant interruptions, performance pressure. So when she finally poked him, his patience snapped. He said something sharp. She responded sharper. The tone shifted. The whole thing collapsed. He left money on the table and walked out. She blocked him that night. James told himself it was her fault, and maybe, on a basic level, her behavior was rude, self-centered, immature. But James missed the real lesson. He didn't lose the date at the rooftop bar. He lost it the moment he agreed to betray himself for a pretty face. That's trap one. The promise of happiness trap happens when a man makes an unconscious trade. "I will abandon myself in exchange for the chance to be chosen." He doesn't say those words, but his behavior says it. He thinks he's being flexible. He thinks he's being agreeable. He thinks he's making it work. What he's really doing is building attraction on top of self-abandonment, and nothing stable grows from that foundation. Here's the deeper psychology. A lot of men have this belief running quietly in the background. If I can get a woman like her, I'll feel like I made it. In other words, her beauty becomes your self-esteem. Her attention becomes your value. Her approval becomes your peace. Her mood becomes your weather. And the second that happens, you stop making choices like a man with standards. You start making choices like a man trying to earn permission to exist. That's why James kept repeating the pattern. Because after Marina, he went on another date with another beautiful woman who wanted an expensive, loud venue. Same internal trade, same outcome. Now here's the part that matters, and it's the part men avoid because it requires honesty. Attraction is not compatibility. Beauty is not character. Chemistry is not values. A woman being stunning does not mean she's kind. It does not mean she respects time. It does not mean she can communicate. It does not mean she shares your lifestyle. It does not mean she has emotional maturity. It means she's attractive. That's it. And if you build your selection process around beauty first, you will constantly walk into situations where you're forced to perform a version of yourself that isn't real. Even if you win her, you lose yourself, because the relationship becomes a lifestyle you can't sustain. The introvert dating the nightlife woman becomes a man living in environments that drain him. The disciplined man dating the chaos woman becomes a man constantly managing emotional storms. The purposeful man dating the attention addict becomes a man competing with strangers for basic respect. So here's the rule to avoid trap one: never build a connection on self betrayal. If you hate loud venues, don't agree to them on a first date. Suggest what fits you. If she insists on a lifestyle you don't enjoy, that's information, not a challenge. The right woman doesn't require you to violate yourself to earn her interest. And this is where men get stuck. They think, but if I say no, she'll think I'm boring. Letter. A woman who labels your identity as boring is doing you a favor by revealing incompatibility early. You're not trying to convince everyone, you're filtering. Because the rarest thing isn't a beautiful woman. The rarest thing is a beautiful woman who is compatible with your nature, respects your boundaries, and can build peace with you. Stop chasing beauty like it's the prize. Compatibility is the prize. Peace is the prize. Respect is the prize. Trap 1 ends the moment you choose self-respect over performance. Now let's move to trap 2, because it's more dangerous. Trap 1 wastes your time. Trap 2 can cost you years, money, and pieces of your life you don't get back. Trap 2, the reversal. I'll tell you about a man I'll call Dimitri. Dimitri was 41, recently divorced. The divorce didn't just hurt emotionally, it hit him structurally. He lost his apartment. His finances took a blow. He was renting a small room and trying to rebuild, and the humiliation of starting over at that age was sitting on his shoulders every day. Then he met a woman I'll call Emma. Emma was 38, had a teenage son, and she owned her own apartment, 2 bedrooms, good location, paid off. Dimitri liked her. He wasn't plotting. He wasn't trying to use her. But in the back of his mind, there was an invisible calculation. If this works, my housing problem is solved. I can breathe again. And that's where trap 2 begins. When you date from need, you lose leverage because you stop evaluating her as a person and start attaching to her as a solution. They moved fast. Within a few months, Dimitri was basically living there. And that's when the reversal started. At first, it was small: a leaky faucet, a shelf, minor repairs. Dimitri was handy, so he fixed them. Then it grew: bathroom work, kitchen appliances, balcony renovation. Now, every weekend, Dimitri was working on her property. His money started going into materials. His energy started going into upgrades. His downtime disappeared. Then came the son, teenage boy, resentful, disrespectful, constant tension. Emma hinted Dimitri should help with school expenses, clothes, a laptop. Dimitri, trying to keep peace and secure belonging, contributed. And 2 years later, he woke up with a quiet, brutal realization. He wasn't building a life. He was maintaining someone else's life. The apartment wasn't his, not legally, not practically. The upgrades increased her equity, not his stability. And when the relationship ended, he walked away with nothing. Worse than nothing, because while he was building her foundation, his own recovery stalled. He had invested into a structure he didn't own. That's the reversal. You enter hoping her life will stabilize yours. Instead, your life becomes the fuel for hers. Now let me give you another version, because trap 2 wears many masks. A man I'll call Sergey dreamed of having a small place outside the city. Somewhere quiet, a garden, a weekend retreat. He couldn't afford it alone. He met a woman who owned exactly that. a small countryside house inherited from her parents. When she mentioned it early, Sergei felt something ignite. This is it, fate. They started spending weekends there, and then Sergei noticed what anyone would notice. The house needed work, roof issues, fence falling, land neglected. Sergei threw himself into it. Every weekend became labor. He spent his savings on materials. He learned new skills. He poured years into making that place beautiful. And 5 years later, the relationship faded. They stopped connecting, became roommates in a project. When it ended, Sergei looked at the house he rebuilt with his hands and realized it was never his. Not one signature, not one legal right, just sweat, time, and attachment. He'd worked for years on someone else's asset. Trap 2 is not just about being used. It's about entering relationships to solve personal problems, housing, loneliness, social status, financial pressure, a lack of direction. If you enter a relationship hoping it will plug a hole in your life, you will accept dynamics you shouldn't accept because the fear of losing the relationship becomes bigger than the fear of losing yourself. And the moment that happens, you become exploitable. The woman doesn't have to be evil. She just has to be human. Humans lean toward whatever makes life easier. If you show up eager to carry weight, people will let you. Here's the rule to avoid trap 2. Never date for rescue. Handle your basics. If you need housing, solve housing. If you're lonely, build a social life, purpose, routines, brotherhood, structure. If you're financially shaky, rebuild. Date when your life is functional without her. Because when you don't need her to survive, you can evaluate her clearly. And I want you to run a simple test before you commit to anyone. If she disappeared tomorrow, would your life still work? Would you still have stability? Would your schedule still have meaning? Would you still have peace? If the answer is no, you're not building partnership. You're building dependency. And dependency always creates leverage. Sometimes that leverage is used consciously. Sometimes it's used accidentally. Either way, the result is the same. Now let's move to trap 3, because trap 3 is the sweetest at the beginning. And that's why it's so dangerous. Trap 3, the generous angel. I want to tell you about a man I'll call Martin. Martin was 39 and had been single for 2 years. He wasn't desperate, but he was tired. Tired of dates that felt like interviews. Tired of women who played games. Tired of the feeling that he always had to prove himself. Then he met a woman I'll call Julia. And from the beginning, she felt like a miracle. Not just beautiful, generous, thoughtful, present. On the first date, she brought him a small gift, a book, connected to something he'd mentioned casually. Not expensive, but personal. On the second date, she insisted on cooking for him. Showed up with groceries, made a full meal, set a mood, remembered details. On the third date, she bought him a sweater because she noticed he'd been cold. She remembered how he took his coffee. She texted him good morning and good night without fail. She seemed to anticipate his needs before he spoke. Andre felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Chosen, seen, valued. And that feeling can intoxicate a man, because when you've been starving for warmth, a flood feels like salvation. Within 2 months, they were exclusive. Within 4, she was basically living with him. Within 8, she was pregnant. And then everything changed. The generosity stopped, but the expectations remained. The sweet texts became demands. The warmth became pressure. The affection became leverage. Andre found himself committed to a life he hadn't fully evaluated. He never stopped long enough to ask basic questions. Who is she when she's upset? How does she handle conflict? Is she consistent over time or just intense early? Does she respect boundaries or does she rush past them? What does she want long term? Is this love or is this acceleration? 2 years later, after a painful separation, Andre was paying child support and wondering how his life turned into a legal contract so quickly. Here's the lesson: intensity is not intimacy. Early generosity can be genuine, but it can also be a campaign, and campaigns have goals. The generous angel trap works because it hijacks the best part of you: your desire to believe in something good, your desire to finally relax, your desire to stop fighting for attention. When someone gives you a lot early, you assume they have a lot to give long term. But many people can perform effort early. The question is not, is she sweet in the beginning? The question is she stable over time? Some people use early intensity because they don't know how to build slowly. Some use it because they're anxious and trying to secure you quickly. Some use it because they want commitment before their real personality shows. Again, not always malicious, but the outcome is still risky if you move too fast. Here's how you avoid trap 3 without becoming cynical. You accept generosity without accelerating commitment. You appreciate, but you don't attach. You stay warm, but you keep pace. A healthy relationship builds in layers. Trust should be earned through time, patterns, and consistency, not through an early highlight reel. Here's a practical test. If the gifts and attention stop tomorrow, would you still want her? If your answer is uncertain, you're attached to the experience, not the person. And experience fades. Character remains. Now zoom out. James, Dmitri, Sergey, Martin. Different men, different situations. Same mistake. They chose based on what they could get instead of what they were getting into. Victor chose beauty and social status. Dmitri chose relief from instability. Sergey chose a lifestyle shortcut. Andre chose the feeling of being finally valued. None of them anchored their selection in compatibility, pacing, and character. And in every case, the warning signs were visible early. Victor ignored clear mismatch and disrespect. Dmitri ignored the imbalance of ownership and investment. Sergey ignored the lack of security and the one-sided equity. Andre ignored the unnatural speed and intensity. They saw the signs, but they didn't want to interpret them because interpreting them would require walking away from something they wanted. And this is the root issue. A lot of men are emotion-led in a part of life that demands strategy. Feelings are real, but feelings are not due diligence. Chemistry is powerful, but chemistry is not a plan. Desire is natural, but desire is not a filter. If you choose a partner based primarily on how she makes you feel early, you are gambling with years of your life. And in gambling, the house eventually collects. So how do you actually avoid these traps in real life? I'll give you a framework you can use immediately. The filtering framework. 1. Know your baseline before you date. Most men date like this: let me meet whoever and see what happens. That sounds relaxed, but it creates a problem. You have no criteria. So you end up choosing based on impulse. Know your baseline. What lifestyle do you want? What communication style do you need? How do you handle conflict? What values are non-negotiable? What type of woman fits your life, not your fantasy? Write it down if you have to, because if you don't know your standards, you will borrow hers. 2. Choose environments that reveal truth, not performance. If you're introverted, don't take dates to performance environments. Choose a calm setting where conversation can happen, not because you're afraid, because you want reality, not theater. A first date is not a stage show, it's a screening. 3. Never date to solve a personal problem. If you're in a fragile season, stabilize first. You can still date casually, but do not attach. Do not move in. Do not merge finances. Do not build your structure on someone else's foundation. If you can't walk away cleanly, you're not free to choose. 4. Slow down when it feels too good too fast. This is the part men resist, because slowing down feels like risking the magic. But real connection survives pace. Only performance needs urgency. You can say, I like you. I'm enjoying this. I'm still moving at a healthy pace. The right woman respects that. The wrong woman pressures you. And pressure is information. 5. Watch behavior under friction. Character shows up when things don't go her way. How does she respond to a boundary? How does she handle disappointment? How does she speak when she's upset? How does she treat people who can't give her anything? Words are easy. Patterns are truth. 6. Learn to say no. Early men wait too long to say no because they want it to work, but the cost of early discomfort is small. The cost of late exit is brutal. Walking away from a bad first date is easy. Walking away from a bad marriage is a life event. Now, I want to come back to Victor, because the point of this isn't theory. Victor is still going on dates and failing because he believes his job is to impress. He's auditioning. But masculine dating success is not built on auditioning. It's built on selecting. You are not trying to get picked by everyone. You are trying to find fit, and fit requires standards. Victor needs to stop treating beauty like a lottery ticket. He needs to stop placing himself in environments where he can't be his best. He needs to stop choosing women who thrive on chaos and then being surprised when he feels drained. Dmitri rebuilt his life slowly after learning the reversal lesson. Sergei learned the painful truth about investing in assets you don't own. Andre learned what happens when you confuse intensity for intimacy. These men are not stupid. They're not weak. They're not hopeless. They're men who walked into traps designed for common male desires: to feel validated, to feel stable, to feel wanted, to feel like you finally made it. Those desires aren't wrong, but if you chase them through shortcuts, you pay with years. So here's the closing lesson, and I want you to take it seriously. The men who win in dating aren't luckier. They're better at filtering. They know what they want. They know what they won't tolerate. They don't get hypnotized by beauty. They don't date for rescue. They don't get intoxicated by early intensity. They move with calm. They gather information. They watch patterns. They choose with self-respect. Be that man. Filter hard. Move slower than your emotions want to move. Keep your identity intact. And remember, every relationship you enter might end, but you will live with yourself forever. So don't build a life where you have to look in the mirror and admit you abandoned your standards for a fantasy. The traps only catch men who can't see them. Now you can see them. The promise of happiness, the reversal, the generous angel. The question isn't whether these traps exist. The question is whether you'll recognize them when they show up wearing a pretty face, a convenient offer, or a flood of attention, and whether you'll have the discipline to walk away. Because that discipline is what separates the man who repeats cycles from the man who builds a life he actually respects.